Hello and welcome to a new Ukraine war update. I know I was silent for quite some time, but today I am back with the longest update so far. A short disclaimer, this is a cut version. The full 50-minute long version is available on my private Telegram channel or on my Ko-fi page in exchange for a coffee. The link is in the description. If you appreciate the tremendous effort I put into this video, please show so with a like and comment. It really helps me out a lot. Thank you. Before we start with the footage, let's have a look at the map to get a better overview of the situation. Based on geolocated footage, we can identify 7 regions where the fighting is currently concentrated. This includes the regions around Kupiansk, Kremmina, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, Robotyne, and the larger Kherson area. Overall, Russia is exploiting Ukraine's shortage of ammunition for artillery and the lack of anti-air defense systems, and remains on the offensive on several fronts with a special focus on the Donetsk region. It seems that, for now, the plan is to seize as much territory as possible from Ukraine in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, while simultaneously nullifying the Ukrainian summer offensive gains in the Zaporizhia region. All this is done with the upcoming US elections in mind, speculating on the victory of Donald Trump, who will then most likely push Ukraine into a dictated peace deal with Russia.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, I will have the disastrous war between Russia and Ukraine settled. And it will take me no longer than one day.
Putin's gamble includes the expectation that Trump will advise Ukraine to surrender all lost territories for peace. This, however, ignores Europe's potential willingness to independently uphold Ukraine's defensive capabilities, even without future support from the United States. But enough about geopolitics for now. After the fall of Avdiivka, Russian forces pushed the front line further west and captured 3 more small villages west of the city. From there, they proceeded to seize large parts of Avdiivka and Tonik. Currently, they attempt to capture Berdychi but have so far failed to break through the Ukrainian lines there. In Berdychi, most of the fighting took place on these 2 small roads connecting the village with Stepov. This is most likely due to the fact that the surrounding fields are heavily mined, what restricts Russian but also Ukrainian movement, forcing both sides to maneuver through a narrow path constantly observed by drones, what makes any attempt to advance costly for each side. What this means is shown quite well in this video. A Russian BTR pushes into Berdychi while being tracked by a Ukrainian drone. The vehicle drops a squad of infantry close to the Ukrainian lines. The Russian soldiers hit the dirt and take position behind a fence right on the spot where they were dropped off. After fulfilling its role as battlefield taxi, the BTR takes a turn and leaves the scene immediately, but is already chased by an Ukrainian FPV drone of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, who then strikes the armored personnel carrier. The drone detonated right between the turret and the open hatch of the commander's seat. Shortly after, the disabled vehicle gets hit one more time and turns into a burning wreck. A Ukrainian Bradley arrives on the scene to engage the Russian soldiers caught in the open. It is unclear why they did not rush into the nearby houses immediately after setting foot on the ground, instead choosing to stay out in the open. This could have been the result of a poorly planned assault or a lack of any plan for actions following the drop. It's possible that the plan was to wait for another squad scheduled to arrive later. Alternatively, they might have encountered Ukrainian forces inside the houses, who pinned them in the open to be engaged by the Bradley in a sort of L-shaped ambush. They definitely faced northwards, while the Ukrainian lines were located west of their position. Despite the first devastating failed assault, the Russians sent in another BTR into the town. This one transported a full squad as well. They maneuvered into the firing line of what was also reported as a Bradley. Footage of what happened then can only be shown on Telegram. The entire area gets blasted while the soldiers were dismounting. Round after round hit its target, taking out the whole squad and the BTR. This video here shows yet again another BTR assault in a sector defended by a Ukrainian Bradley. The Bradley sneaks up on one of the BTRs and fires at it from extreme close range using its 25mm Bushmaster cannon. As often mentioned, the armor of the BTR is pretty thin, so every higher caliber goes through its hull like a knife through butter. As a result, the BTR is destroyed. There was also footage from the turret of a Bradley during a similar situation, but I cannot say for sure if it's the same BTR, even if the chances are high. All in all, the battle for Berdychi is fought like the battle for Stepov, meaning lots of action in very narrow space. Here we see an abandoned BTR that got stuck in a crater being taken out by a FPV drone. It won't be the last stuck armored vehicle of this update. Here one more BTR with a squad of infantry on top of it crashes and gets stuck in a ditch. The soldiers are left on their own without a ride. And this BTR here lands inside a pond and drowns under. Normally the BTR is able to swim, but seems like it got stuck because of the angle and mud inside the pond. BTRs were not the only assets used for the assaults west of Avdiivka. Here we see a pair of BMPs operating in the wasteland. One BMP is hit in the rear by an FPV drone but stays in the fight. Shortly after, it even avoided being hit by cluster munitions. The vehicle, however, is still disabled by a hit or a mine and becomes static. From then on, it becomes an easy target for FPV drones and cluster munitions. Later, the BMP-3 blows up in a huge blast, leaving just a wreck behind. Russia's offensive actions west of Avdiivka stay costly, and the Russian armed forces are losing a lot of equipment and manpower. The problem for Ukraine is, however, that they now have to rely largely on FPV drones and mines alone to fend off the Russian attacks due to a lack of artillery ammunition. This, however, is more time-consuming than simply stopping an assault with artillery, and time is a thing Ukraine currently does not have. This allows Russia to make slow but steady gains that are costly but benefit them on the political battlefield. Russian troops try to occupy the gray zone by taking up positions in basements and houses, hoping they will shelter them from artillery and drones. However, the number one protection is not being spotted at all, what is pretty hard given the fact the battle takes place on very close quarters. The amount of precision strike capabilities drones can give soldiers on even squad and platoon level is just insane. The Ukrainian military did everything in their might to hold off the endless Russian waves of attacks and even sent the M1 Abrams into battle. However, there are already reports of at least 3 Abrams being taken out so far, with at least one video showing clearly how one got disabled. The crew, however, survived. It is said that a combination of mines, FPV drones and ATGMs was used. Russia also released footage of 2 Russian soldiers rushing to inspect another disabled M1 Abrams, but the overall pace and look of the video has propaganda written all over it. It is clear that they are in a hurry and just wanted to climb inside at one time just for the show. This, however, does not change the fact that the Abrams was disabled. But this does also not change the fact that this is not the giant victory against the Western war machine they want to portray. Sorry, the world is not that black and white. Despite fierce resistance by the Ukrainians, Russia's willingness to sacrifice large amounts of men and equipment even for minor gains creates results, and by the time I am sitting on this update, the southern part, including the village's main road, was captured, and Berdychi is now at the risk of falling in the next days. This is a truly interesting archival video from August 2023, just released this year. It combines drone and helmet camera footage and shows international volunteer fighters among the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces executing an extremely well-conducted assault on a Russian trench system in the region around Avdiivka. The white rope you see on the right side going alongside the Humvee's path is from a previously used MiG. This stands for Mine Clearing Line Charge, what means the area was mined. In total, about 30 men in 5 Humvees conducted the assault, so a platoon-sized element was involved. The footage was recorded southeast from Pervomaisk, and the Russian positions were located here. Looks like the Humvees were advancing alongside this tree line. The second Humvee of the column hit a mine and got disabled. The crew, however, was okay. Based on the footage, the disruptive factor the mine had on the soldiers was close to 0, and the men kept working towards their objective and continued the assault. It's possible that the dust and smoke stirred up by their arrival and the detonation of the mine were actually beneficial, as they provided some concealment while they were dismounting from their vehicles. However, this might only appear to be the case because of the camera's perspective. An RPG was fired at them but missed. As you can see in the bottom left, the battle was documented by 2 squads, Alpha and Bravo, but later more to this. They struck the Russians with speed and determination as they were advancing from their dismounting site towards the trench while sending heavy fire at the Russian positions. They had to be aggressive, since even if it was only a short distance to their objective, the terrain was open, putting them at a disadvantage as they had to advance across it. Quite a few grenades were thrown at the Russians to support the advance, and soon the men were at their doorsteps. At least 1 to 2 squads of Russian soldiers occupied 2 trenches right next to each other, with the Ukrainians driving a wedge between the 2 while simultaneously sandwiching one. The video was uploaded by Yuri Butasov, a famous Ukrainian military blogger. I will link to the full version on his channel in the pinned comment under this video. It looks like the speed and aggressiveness paid off, as the Russians were pretty much caught off guard by the attack and could not manage to put up an organized defense. Here, a lone Russian soldier tried to suppress both squads at once in a spray and pray manner, which did not work out well. The men who recorded this footage are part of Chosen Company, a group of international foreign volunteer fighters fighting in the 59th Motorized Brigade. I think they are currently only active on Instagram, so I will link their account in the description as well. There you can find options to support the unit, even if it seems their donation link is sadly currently down. Russian FPV drones were sent in to counter the attack, as visible here. while Alpha and Bravo took the initiative to push into the trenches as fast as possible. Charlie, who got dropped off a little bit too far in the back, had a more passive approach and was lurking out in the open in front of the second trench, where they engaged in a firefight with Russian soldiers. Grenades were thrown, and seems like even some grenades that were thrown by Charlie rolled back and forced them to take cover. While Alpha and Bravo were composed of international fighters, Charlie consisted of a squad of Ukrainian soldiers who were attached to the platoon. One Russian managed to fire an RPG at the Ukrainians. He aimed too high, however, and the rocket-propelled grenade went over Charlie's heads and missed. While Charlie struggled to reach and maintain the same level of aggressiveness as Alpha and Bravo, their efforts were still sufficient to fix and distract the Russians in their trench. This allowed Alpha and Bravo to conduct a pincer movement on the Russians in the other trench, ultimately cutting off both Russian elements from each other. One more FPV drone appeared on the sky and landed close to Alpha, but also missed, however. The original video is way longer and shows Russians who got KI as well as Ukrainians WI, but I had to cut it because of YouTube and so that you have a reason to pay Butasov a visit. In the end, the combined efforts of the international fighters and Ukrainians led to a sandwiching of the last remains of Russian resistance that got cleared afterwards without losses on the Ukrainian side. The third Russian FPV drone and the third miss, a little miracle since statistically one of 3 hits its target. This Ukrainian tank scored a direct hit from close range on an approaching Russian BMP, which drove right in front of the tank's barrel in Avdiivka. After receiving a direct hit to its front armor, the BMP continued driving towards the tank but was, however, taken out of action. Shortly after, it came to a standstill in a tree line where the burning wreck of a second Russian IFV could be seen, most likely also taken out by the Ukrainian tank. It should be noted that the region around Avdiivka has witnessed a very high number of visually documented armor-on-armor engagements. Many of these engagements involved the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. Similar to the previous clips, a huge portion of them was filmed during close-range engagements. Here we can see a Bradley finishing off a Russian BMP-2 with its autocannon. This BMP was most likely already abandoned, but you might remember that in a previous update on the Ukraine war, there was also one case of a direct force-on-force confrontation between another Russian BMP and a Bradley. It is interesting that most of these engagements were at very close range, considering that one of the strengths of the Bradley, in particular, is its high accuracy even at greater distances. However, I believe the nature of the battle and the terrain led to this. Most of these engagements were documented in either Stepov or Berdychi, where, as mentioned before, the entire battles took place in very narrow spaces. A Bradley was even used against its own kind when it engaged a disabled Leopard 2 alongside another Bradley, in order to prevent the Russians from making use of them should they capture both. A significant moment for the history books occurred when a group of Bradleys faced off against a Russian T-90 tank in combat. They successfully disabled it, paving the way for a subsequent FPV drone strike in Stepov. The Bradleys, operated by Ukraine's 47th Mechanized Brigade, effectively used their 25mm cannons to disable the tank's optics. This targeting caused the T-90's turret to spin uncontrollably and ultimately crash into a tree. Despite the T-90M being Russia's most advanced battle tank, with sophisticated armor and firepower, the Ukrainian Bradley's precise and rapid fire managed to outmaneuver and overpower it. The Bradleys aimed at the juncture of the hull and turret, a known vulnerable point, and their strategy was effective. This encounter is noteworthy as it showcases the Bradley's effectiveness against a formidable adversary like the T-90M. This video, released earlier this year, has received considerable coverage from various channels. A major question raised was why the T-90 was operating alone. However, I consider this a common occurrence in this war, with both sides known to employ single units, especially for preparing assaults or providing relief to forces under pressure. This might have been the case here, considering how Russian troops proceeded to gain ground in Stepov. After suffering high losses in their initial push towards Avdiivka, Russian forces reportedly began sending small squads to platoon-sized infantry elements with the objective of occupying positions, particularly in the basements of the many ruins of small houses in the area. The Ukrainians often dispatched Bradleys to deal with these kinds of situations. It's highly likely that the Russian unit originally targeted by one of the Bradleys requested armored support, leading to the dispatch of the T-90 to assist the squad under pressure. However, this is not a confirmed account, and I am not claiming to provide the ultimate truth. It's, however, a plausible explanation. But what do you think? Again, very large portions of this fight took place on extremely close range, as you can see here. It's unfortunate that the video quality is quite low. Hopefully, a higher resolution version will be released in the future if it exists. The chance of this, however, is low. Here, we witness the crew beginning to lose control of the turret, which starts spinning, causing the tank to crash into a tree. Subsequently, it was targeted by an FPV drone, as you will soon see. The crew survived and escaped. According to a Ukrainian soldier who served as a gunner on one of the Bradleys, he experienced issues with his armor-piercing rounds. As a result, he effectively used high explosive rounds, targeting the T-90 tank's sensors to render the tank inoperative. Interestingly, he mentioned learning about the tank's vulnerabilities through playing video games. Most Russian IFVs are vulnerable to any caliber beyond 50, but the T-90 is an entirely different challenge, which makes this clip so significant. Despite incredible documented battlefield performance during the battle for Avdiivka, the Bradley is not indestructible and could not hold off the Russian waves forever, as the results on the maps show. This of course also comes due to the fact that they only have a limited amount of them available, but for this they outperformed every single Russian asset out there so far. Still, Bradleys were lost, like this one who drove onto a mine and lost its track, but preserved the life of its crew, who can be seen getting away. The biggest struggle for Ukraine, however, stays Russia's willingness to take huge amount of losses for even minor territorial gains, paired with the lack of artillery ammunition and air defense, allowing the Russians to make use of their air force again. Here we can see the crew leaving. Looks like Ukraine operates Bradleys only with 2 crew members instead of 3, including only driver and gunner. But back to the air war. Ukraine on their side claims to have shot down an extreme high number of Russian warplanes since the start of 2024, but still this is not enough, and here we can see a Russian warplane flying freely above Avdiivka. Another factor contributing to Russia's recent advances is the effective and massive use of cheap glide bombs. These bombs can be dropped out of range of most anti-air defense systems, far behind the front line. They are inexpensive, very difficult to intercept, precise and devastating. As widely known, Russia has traditionally focused on ground-based fires, such as artillery, while NATO has adopted a more air-based strategy. In this aspect, it could be said that Russia has partially adopted a NATO-like approach with the use of these glide bombs. But that is not all, as you will see later. This creates a dilemma where Ukraine has to bring its already limited air defense assets closer to the front line, where they then are at risk of being spotted and engaged as high-value targets by Russia. This has not only led to the destruction of a Norwegian advanced surface-to-air missile system, as you could just witness here, but even to what looks like the first confirmed destruction of 2 Patriot launchers that were first mislabeled as S-300 systems. It has to be said that the footage is pretty grainy, but multiple sources stated that it is likely that this was indeed a pair of Patriot launchers. Seems like Russia has employed some sort of NATO-like mission-type tactics paired with improved intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities to hunt for such high-value systems, because the list of assets recently destroyed goes on. Russia not only managed to destroy air defense systems, but also documented a strike on 3 Ukrainian Mi-8 or 17 helicopters using cluster munitions. As a result of the strike, 2 of the helicopters were destroyed. Looks like the cluster munitions first disabled the helicopters, who were then struck again by precision munitions. 2024 also marks the year of Ukraine's first documented loss of a high-mobility artillery rocket system. According to Russian sources, an Iskander-M was used to destroy the HIMARS near the village of Nikanorovka in the Donetsk region, around 40 kilometers from the front line. While the loss of a single HIMARS isn't that significant at the moment, the fact that Russia might step up their ISR game and employ the working fast mission-type tactics system to successfully strike high-value targets like this more often from now on should be at least considered to be a possible future concern. Russia also claims to have already destroyed a second HIMARS, but here footage leaves room for much speculation, and pro-Ukrainian sources already mentioned this could very well have been a decoy. Here we have very rare footage of a Ukrainian Humvee Avenger system in action as it gets hunted by what was reported as a Russian Lancet drone system. The Avenger launched 2 surface-to-air missiles who both missed, but gave the Avenger precious time to get away. We need to talk a bit about the fall of Avdiivka, as there seems to be an impression that I became unusually quiet on this channel following that event. The truth is, I've been mostly inactive since the beginning of the year. This inactivity wasn't due to the fall of Avdiivka or Russia's recent gains. In fact, I'm very transparent about these issues. My lack of activity was primarily due to a combination of winter depression and my commitment to watching tutorials to improve the quality of the maps and production in my videos, which you might have noticed in this latest one. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Now, back to Avdiivka. Its fall was influenced by several factors: the mentioned lack of artillery munitions and air defense, Russia's willingness to sacrifice troops, its effective use of massive amounts of glide bombs, war fatigue in the west, and also General Syrskyi's decision to relinquish the city. This allowed Ukrainian troops to fall back to, in their words, more favorable positions. This decision marked a 180-degree turn from General Syrskyi's earlier strategy during the defense of Bakhmut, where he maintained control of the city for as long as possible. There are 2 main reasons reasons for this change in strategy, one military and one political. From a military standpoint, the constant Russian pressure and their numerical superiority meant that the city would have eventually fallen into Russian hands anyways, and Ukraine could only have delayed this. Furthermore, by the time the decision to withdraw was made, the city was primarily defended by the 47th Mechanized Brigade and the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, which had just been relocated to the area. Both are among Ukraine's most effective elite brigades. They were at risk of encirclement within the town, so to preserve their fighting capability, the decision to pull back was the right one. The political reason likely stemmed from the fact that Syrskyi's predecessor, Salochny, is well liked among Ukrainian soldiers, especially after his decision to cancel the attempts at a massive mechanized assault to break through the Russian lines on the southern front. This decision likely doomed the Ukrainian counteroffensive to failure, but saved many Ukrainian lives. Syrsky, on the other hand, was known for following a more traditional Soviet-style approach, willing to sacrifice a large number of soldiers, much like his Russian counterparts. This is why I mentioned the 180-degree turn. Such an approach, however, would have only increased Salochny's popularity among the troops, which could have led to political disturbances. South of Marinka, Russian forces have been attempting to capture Novomikhailivka for several months now, and have recently made progress. Their efforts have primarily originated from the main road leading into the town from the south, the fields west of the town behind a series of tree lines, and the field northeast of the town. These axes of approach extend over terrain that is 90% wide open, offering no cover or concealment. This makes Russian columns easy targets for various weapon systems, including ATGMs and FPV drones. Russia primarily attacks with small squads to platoon-sized elements, similar to tactics used in other parts of the front, employing the same bite and hold tactics Ukraine previously used in the south. However, as the drone footage shows, a significant amount of equipment is lost during these pushes. This pattern continued for several months, during which unit after unit was sent towards the town, only to be destroyed. The attacks are primarily led by Russia's 155th Naval Infantry Brigade, which, according to geolocated footage, has definitely lost numerous vehicles during the assaults before even reaching the town. Concerning the types of vehicles, there appears to be extensive use of MTLBs. Of all the armored vehicles at Russia's disposal, the MTLB is essentially the least effective in terms of armor and firepower, rendering it suitable only as a battlefield taxi, and even then, not very effective. As you can see here, the main road leading up to the town is littered with the wrecks of armored vehicles, and everything moving on it is basically an easy target for cluster munitions and other types of weapons. Same like with the surrounding fields. However, here the lack of artillery munition also becomes a problem for Ukraine. The town is defended by the Ukrainian 79th Air Assault Brigade and 116th Territorial Defense Brigade and 2 drone groups in the rear. This video from earlier this year shows one of the many assaults from the perspective of one fighter of the 155th Naval Brigade who documented parts of it with his helmet camera. According to Ukrainian sources, Russian assault operations take place almost every day. Novomikhailivka is located about 12 kilometers south of the town of Marinka that is currently under Russian control. It also appears that Russia has been deploying reserve forces in this area. The Russians here are under fire by artillery including cluster munitions and advance through a devastated tree line without any armor support as it seems. Unclear if their goal was to reach the town on foot or if they wanted to occupy this empty trench system you see here as a base for future assaults. After numerous attempts, the Russians managed to enter the city from the east and have captured about 30% of it by now. I must openly acknowledge that this town is at risk of falling in the near future. Helmet cam footage claims to show Russian troops inside the town as they clear a ruin that appears empty. Nonetheless, they proceed to clear it with fire. While this may partly be for the camera, it's also standard procedure, similar to how empty trenches are handled. Ultimately, there's always a risk that someone could be hiding in a corner, even if a room, building, or trench seems empty. These scenes were released by the Russian Ministry of Defense, and a noticeable difference in the quality of the footage compared to the previous one is evident. The raw video had sound effects of artillery, explosions, and gunfire added to make it seem like there was more action happening around these men than there actually was. If you really watched till now, I wanted to say thank you. Your support really means a lot to me. I hope this video earned a like. This really helps me with the algorithm so that this video reaches more people. I really put time and effort into this. Also feel free to leave a comment and to share this video. I know I was inactive for some time now, but I plan to upload more regularly from now on. Also interesting how these soldiers have high-end cameras but no advanced sights on their rifles. But this only is a side note, and now let's take a look even further south to the Zaporizhia region where fighting also goes on. Besides massive efforts in the Donetsk region, Russia has also launched an offensive to retake the small town of Robotyne, which Ukrainian forces had captured from Russia last summer. Russian forces have managed to regain some territory, and have pushed into the town, but overall, Ukraine's defense seems to remain stable. Here you can see drone footage recorded from a screen of a Russian operator from such a push that managed to reach the town center. The tank leading the assault was disabled right at the start of reaching the town's outskirts, and the two infantry fighting vehicles had to keep pushing on their own through the wasteland while being under fire. Looks like BMP-3 fighting vehicles were used here to bring infantry into the town. We can see some outgoing fire from the BMP-3 to support their advance, but overall the vehicles are also used as mere battlefield taxis here, meaning drive in, drop off, get out. This is understandable since any prolonged stay is extremely dangerous for the vehicles due to FPV drones. While these BMPs managed to bring troops inside the town, it does not seem that this was of any use since Robotyne remains under Ukrainian control for now. However, I would call the situation for Ukraine difficult, dynamic and complex. Russia's attempt to recapture the town is more because of political reasons, and the message this would send especially to the willingness of the West to further support Ukraine. It would let it look like all the efforts to capture the area so far would have been made in vain, so this operation is more aimed at especially American minds in the shadow of the upcoming presidential election. I do not know what happened after the Russians went into these buildings, but if I remember correctly, I have not seen any videos showing Ukrainian strikes on the buildings since then. This first-person helmet cam video, recorded by the Special Forces of the Ukrainian National Guard, shows what these types of assaults on Robotyne look like for Ukrainian soldiers on the ground. They observe Russian armored vehicles in their vicinity and proceed to target them with disposable rocket launchers, including an AT-4. This conflict has demonstrated that, particularly in small settlements, villages and towns, hard cover is relative, and in most cases, only basements provide at least a minimum level of protection. Additionally, these scenes reveal the flat, vast and devastated terrain in which they are fighting. The effective firing range of the AT-4, as well as most other small disposable rocket launchers, does not exceed 300 meters, so what they attempted here was quite challenging to pull off, to be honest. Additionally, these systems are more designed for use against stationary or lightly armored vehicles. It appears that the Russian vehicles were significantly beyond that range and constantly moving. For this situation, a couple of NLAWs would have been the perfect solution. However, these men have to fight with what they have, so they tried their best. For javelins, the vehicles were a little bit too close. While the Russian vehicles moved through their field of fire without noticing the men, they were still at risk of being spotted by a Russian observer drone every second they remained out in the open. Therefore, this situation was more perilous than it appeared at first glance. Being spotted would most likely have meant being targeted by incoming artillery or FPV drones. It seems that despite all their efforts, the Russian armored vehicles managed to drop off infantry inside the town. Consequently, the Ukrainians brought a previously hidden Mk-19 automatic grenade launcher into position to target the approximate location of the dismounted infantry. Given the high likelihood that infantry squads, having just disembarked from vehicles, are temporarily in close proximity to each other, such a weapon, effective against area targets, can be quite formidable. However, as you can see, it seems that things did not go as planned, and the men proceeded to sporadically target the direction with small arms fire before retreating back into their shelter. According to the source who sent me this video, one of the vehicles was later disabled by a mine, while another was hit by an FPV drone. Still, an NLAW would have been the ideal piece of equipment for these soldiers in this situation. Also, the air war over Ukraine continues, and here we see a Ukrainian detachment shooting down what has been reported as a Russian Kh-101 cruise missile over Kiev. A Browning M2 machine gun was used to shoot down the missile. This footage here shows the downing of a Russian Shahed 136 over Odessa by a Ukrainian Navy SAM system. This clip captures the downing of a Ukrainian drone by Russian troops somewhere on the front line. And this video here depicts a surgical drone dropped grenade strike on a Russian man-pad system. As you can see, the war of attrition rages on also in, or perhaps especially in, the air. Once an asset gets spotted, it can effectively be engaged with precise accuracy, and this works even more well with stationary targets. I was speaking about more armored vehicles who became stuck in the beginning of the video, and here we have a disabled Ukrainian Leopard 2 who got stuck in a crater. Pretty interesting way to increase the targetable area of anti-tank guided missiles. A column of Russian tanks with infantry on top of it under attack by Ukrainian cluster munitions during a failed assault in a forest on the front. What's pretty interesting here is that it shows how the troops on the ground witnessed these strikes we usually only see on drone cameras. You can see that they jump off their vehicles to take cover as fast as they can to avoid further targeting. This was part of a way longer video, but this update is already the longest I ever did, so I cut it. They were lucky since it seems most of them made it after the impacts. Here is another example of cluster munitions landing close in front of a Russian soldier. Here a Russian RPG misfires and the soldiers jump for cover after the fail. A lot of very old equipment is used in this war, so things like this happen. Here a Russian BMP-3 is used for indirect fire. Basically there is nothing special about this video since it is well known that Russia uses their tanks and armored vehicles for this quite often. However, what is special is what the other side does, as you will soon see. This type of fire is basically also done if it is too dangerous to deploy the vehicles for direct fire missions, so to not leave them unused. The Ukrainians are also known to do this with old tanks, but now even use their advanced CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle for this, as you can see here. Pretty interesting to see such a modern piece of IFV in such a role. A new chapter in the book of attrition as a Ukrainian drone targets a simple Russian car with a drone drop grenade. The car is hit and engulfs in flames. However, because of the rain the fire stops. This does not stop the operator to keep filming the smoking vehicle. From several angles he records the damaged car even after the rain already stopped. Later, even another grenade is dropped in another. Looks like target practicing. Here a Ukrainian drone hits a Russian recon drone several times in mid-air, causing the Russian drone to crash. With more and more drones being used over the sky of Ukraine, scenes like this are not as rare anymore, and this year alone has seen a huge amount of videos showing similar events, but more to this in the next update. The whole scene even got filmed by another Ukrainian drone observing everything. This helmet cam footage shows Ukrainian soldiers of the 81st Airmobile Brigade clearing Russian positions with two M62 mines as explosive charges nearby Avdiivka in the Luhansk region. The soldier throwing the mines as explosives uses a lighter to ignite a fuse and then throws the mines into holes into the Russian positions, who then get blown up. Of course, he also uses grenades and moves with fire to suppress the Russians inside, but the mine charges seem quite effective in the result, even if it looks a bit strange seeing him using a lighter to ignite the fuse. I believe this is not the first time we see mines used like this, if I remember correctly, and think there was a similar video last year from the southern front. I could be wrong here, but don't know. If you know more or remember for sure, let me know in the comments. Speaking about mines, both sides came up with this innovative idea to use unmanned ground vehicles to place mines, and they can place quite a lot of them pretty fast, as these videos here show. They can definitely carry more than a human and place them also faster. The mine is basically one of the oldest, if not the oldest, autonomous weapon system on its own. Fascinating to see this mix of old and new technology, but I have to say that I am no friend of mines, even if I have to admit that they are one of the most effective anti-armor weapons currently used in this war. In the Serebryansky forest near Kremmina, fighting between Russian forces and the Ukrainian Azov brigade continues to be intense, as this helmet cam video shows. Depicted as an assault on Russian positions inside the forest, and as you can see from the video, the amount of outgoing fire is insane. Also, it seems the incoming is quite heavy. During the fight, several Russian soldiers were KIA, and the Ukrainians also captured prisoners. The Azov fighters made use of a lot of weapon systems such as assault rifles, machine guns, rocket launchers and grenade launchers. In the forest it can happen that Ukrainian and Russian trenches are located quite close to each other, resulting in many firefights, assaults and raids kicked off by both sides. The original video was longer and quite hectic, so I cut it to not go crazy commenting on all of this. I hope you understand this, and if you are still here listening to my monotone voice, a big thank you from my side. I keep my voice so monotone on purpose due to the nature of the footage, and so I do not sensationalize. Also, I have no one who writes my scripts and edits the videos for me. Most other channels employ an army of Fiverr freelancers to do their editing, but I am doing everything alone, so having you stick with me through the video is just awesome. Thank you. In conclusion of this update, and the first 3 months of the year, it must be acknowledged that the situation remains difficult for Ukraine. Russia's offensive has yielded some gains, and while not substantial, they are still more significant than Ukraine's counteroffensive gains last summer. This could potentially influence politicians in the West who are opposed to continuing support for Ukraine. The shortage of artillery ammunition and air defense systems, as frequently mentioned in this update, remains a major concern. Additionally, the potential of Trump's victory in the 2024 presidential elections casts an uncertain shadow over Ukraine. However, the war is far from lost for Ukraine, but its outcome is heavily dependent on Western aid. This year, for sure, will be a crucial one in this war, not only for Ukraine but also for Europe. The question is, will they uphold Ukraine's war efforts even if the United States will not under a potential presidency of Trump? And how will Trump react if his plan to end the war in 24 hours does not work out the way he imagined it, or Putin stabs him in the back after a deal? This is a total different perspective we all have not considered. As daunting as the situation seems, even in the face of this new potential escalation, a deal still appears to be a realistic future option. The issue is that Russia currently has a slight upper hand, and things are going reasonably well for Putin. Why shouldn't he seize as much territory as he can? Here, France's potential intervention comes into play, possibly involving the deployment of French troops in Odessa and Kharkiv. This would also likely then lead to the deployment of additional European troops from other countries. While a risky move, this would create a red line and counterbalance to Russia's current advantage. It would also ensure that any deal between Putin and Trump would only extend to those areas, potentially leading to a loss of the territories currently occupied by Russia, including Crimea, but allowing Ukraine's continued existence for the time being. This would be the best scenario for Ukraine if the West decides not only to discontinue but also not to intensify their arms shipments to Ukraine. Ukraine would not like this, however. In the end, this would let Ukraine look like the loser, even if they in reality would have won the war, or at least have let it end it in a stalemate if we consider Russia's starting goals of this war. And it would let the Russians look like the winners, because there would be more Ukrainian territory under their control than there was 2014, while Ukraine could not realize their goals of liberating all their territory. This, however, is only how it would look like, and in reality both sides would not be happy with this sort of outcome, what in the end would make this an okay deal. For any better outcome or deal, Ukraine currently needs more of everything, and this fast and steady, what however requires the West switching to a serious wartime economy. I am only talking about possibilities here, however. This is an opinion piece, and nothing I said has to be the case.